Welcome to the Ardan Labs Podcast. Our special guest today is Jonathan Amsterdam. Jonathan, thank you so much for wanting to hang out with us this morning and talk about your journey through your career, man. I'm really excited to hear this story. Give everybody who may not know you the 2-minute spiel on sort of what you're doing today, but keep it focused on today.
I work on the Go team at Google. Currently, I'm working on Go's Model Context Protocol SDK. In the past, my notable projects have been Slog, the structured logging package in the standard library, HTTP, MUX enhancements, and various random things usually with APIs and SDKs.
I'm excited near the end of this to talk about the MCP stuff because I've been working on the AI stuff for about a year just to learn it and I'll then be able to teach some of it. And I'm just not sold on this MCP thing just yet. So it's going to be really interesting to hear your thoughts about it. This is a show about you and your journey. So I've got to sort of throw you into the time machine. But before we do that, I want you to clear your mind. Don't think too hard. I want to hear that first memory that you have of doing something on a computer. What's that first memory?
So I'm going to answer a slightly different question, which is the first time I saw code.
Okay.
There were no personal computers at the time, but I must have been, 10 or 12 or something, watching public television. And this show comes on called Fortran for Morons, Geniuses, and Hobbits. And
on what, like PBS? That was like on PBS or something?
Yep. And I remember the exact lesson I watched. It was about the Fortran arithmetic if, which is like if some integer variable, 3 labels. If it's less than 0, you branch to this one. If it equals 0, you branch to this one. If it's greater, you branch to the other one. And I remember thinking, it's pretty obvious. Why is this taking a whole hour lesson to teach that? But I had no access to a computer, and I know, it didn't really go anywhere. So the first time I touched a computer and wrote code was 10th grade. So my high school was 10, 11, 12.
When did you graduate high school? That way we get a better sense. Yeah, you got to answer it.
Yeah, it was 1979. Yeah.
79. Oh my God.
So for those who are doing the math, the way I like to talk about my age these days is I'm on my last power of 2. That's the way I like to say it.
79. Okay. And you grew up in New York? Where did you grow up?
I grew up, I know you grew up in Long Island, right? So
yeah.
I was in Baldwin.
Baldwin. Okay. Cool.
So the first chapter in I took this weird math curriculum, not the standard one. And in 10th grade, the first chapter was basic programming, the basic programming language. And I read the chapter the first night, it wasn't
But this is like 1977. You're doing a programming class in high school? Really?
It wasn't a programming. It was the regular math curriculum, but it was weird. It was Columbia Teachers College, very weird thing that I was very grateful for because I learned a lot of interesting math that was way beyond what they would normally teach in high school. Not that it was like hard. It was just weird, like proofs and stuff. Like I know people do proofs in geometry. Anyway, so yeah, they threw in like this chapter on basic. So I read the chapter in one night. I'm like, this is just obvious. This is easy. And yeah, I'd love to try this out. So I went to the computer room. The computer room consisted of 2 paper teletypes. So what I mean is that there's a keyboard, no screen. There's a roll of paper. And you type on the paper, and the computer replies by typing back on the paper. Storage was punched paper tape. I would carry on these rolls of paper tape. And that the computer itself was in like Syosset or something, some other town on Long Island. It was a PDP-11 with 64K of RAM, serving something like 30 or 40 high schools on Long Island.
I was just gonna say, how did you have
Timeshare.
access to that? Because that's interesting.
Yeah, it was a thing that some high schools had. It was a time shared computer, what we called time shared, and well, I guess it's still time shared. It's just now it would be virtualized or something, but it was just everyone was swapping in and out of that 64K, multiple times a second. Um, yeah, so I started programming BASIC, and there must have been times after school when I was not in that computer room, but I don't remember them. I must have done something else.
That's
But
mind blowing to me because
pretty
I
much every,
graduated in '87, and we didn't have any computer lab at Harbor Fields in 1987. There were computers in the offices. I broke into the one that had the grades on it because they put the password like underneath the keyboard for some stupid reason. But like and my parents got me a K Pro 2, and I remember in like 1985 going to a user, one of the first meetups, right? Carrying my little K Pro 2. But like
no, this
I'm
is
kind of
before.
jealous that in 70, like I had to be like 77, so you had access to a computer. That's super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, access. I mean, I never physically saw the computer. I didn't see a PDP-11 until college. So PDP, for people who don't know, so there was this company out of Massachusetts called DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, and they were quite large especially in the educational space, and they made a lot of what in the day we called mini computers, uh, which today would be just massive, physically massive boxes. They were like the size, I think, of a small refrigerator, like a mini refrigerator or maybe bigger. But they were mini computers compared to the huge like IBM computers. They were relatively cheap, and so you could get one, you could afford one, provided you shared it among like 40 high schools or something. Um, yeah. So, and everything was done over, I guess they were telephone lines, or maybe I think there was something called T1, which were faster,
Yeah.
physical
Dedicated, yeah. Data.
dedicated. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't really, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
But what else were you interested in high school? Like, I mean, that's cool. But it sounds like you were like, what else were you doing? Was it? It couldn't have been all studies. Are you doing art, music?
Yeah. So I didn't do any sports. I did something called Mathletes, which was like math competitions. I wasn't very good at that. I don't know. I was very interested in, I thought my father he's not a doctor, but he's like a bioscientist guy. So I was very interested in biology. So I must have done something with that. I
So
don't
I
know.
guess you were just literally just hanging out with friends, and I mean, in the
Yeah,
'70s, that's kind
what was I
late '70s. That's
doing?
what we did, right? I mean,
There's nothing to do. No, I
yeah.
must be doing something. I don't know. A lot of homework. I don't remember.
I mean, if you
I
ask
spent a
me
lot of
what I
time in
was
the
doing,
computer room, Bill. A lot of time.
I mean, I had a patch of in Long Island. You could have this, right? I had a patch of woods behind my house. I think I spent my childhood in those woods, running around playing games, manhunt or whatever it was.
We played like baseball in the street and stuff, my friends, and kicking around stuff. And
But it
yeah,
sounds like in high school you were more interested in the maths and the sciences, I guess,
yeah, I
at
was
that point.
pretty much a nerd. Yeah. Oh, theater. I did theater. I love theater.
Nice.
Yeah, I did do theater. Um, unlike you, we love to be on the stage. we love, we love to be talking to people on the stage. I don't do theater anymore, but I talk at conferences. Yeah, and you do it all the time. So yeah, I did that. That was a big part of junior high and high school.
That makes a lot of sense because Allie, my wife, was always like, John has such an amazing presence on stage, right? And
Frustrated actor.
you don't see a lot of people coming out of Google doing what you do and then having that sort of presence. Like there are people, but it's rare. But now I can tell Allie, yeah, well, he has a theater background. There it is. Nice. So I guess it's obvious that as you're going to graduate high school, you're thinking college. So talk about that a little bit. Like what
Yeah, that
schools are
was
you thinking about?
never really a question. Yeah, I was a very pretentious kid, so I applied to the best colleges and was lucky enough to get into Harvard, so that's where I went. And it was an amazing experience.
What were the other colleges were you trying to go after the
Yeah,
MITs
I
and the
went to the others,
Stanfords and
Princeton, Brown, MIT. I love telling this story about the MIT application. I literally mailed it and it was postmarked one day late. So I guess this was the uh, class of 79 or something. So they replied, "Thank you for your application to the class of 80." It's just so MIT. It's like, not you're late. It's just like, thanks for next year. Um,
Ah.
so I didn't,
Would you have
I
gone
didn't
to MIT if you got
go.
in there? Like,
Maybe, but
no.
I'm glad I didn't because I was actually very. Part of being pretentious was like, oh, I'm not just interested in science. I'm interested in all the humanities. And MIT, has a humanities department. Like all the humanities are in one department. So I'm very glad I went to a place where I could study, literature and poetry and I don't know. Actually, I didn't actually do a lot of stuff. I should have done more history. I should have done economics. A lot of things I regret doing. Not regret, but I should have done more stuff. But anyway, yeah, I had a good time there. So they didn't have a computer science department at Harvard. They had applied mathematics and then you pick what you're applying it to. And there was a computer science thing, but I actually did biology because I was still interested in biology. I thought I was going to be a doctor, even though every opportunity I got, like I did these 2 summer science programs in high school, 2 different summers. And both of them, they were both biology based. But in both of them, I ended up just finding the computer and playing with it. One of them was like punched cards. That was my one experience with punch cards. And the other was like this fancy math calculator that was like the size
But
of a box. But I never did
you
much
went
biology, just computers.
so
So
you
I
went
never,
into university thinking you were going to be a doctor. Like that
yeah,
was, and that's
yeah,
because of
this
your dad being the.
this math stuff was just going to be a sideline. Sorry, go
That's
ahead.
interesting. No, no, that's interesting.
Yeah,
That's super
my
interesting.
dad didn't push me to be a doctor. My grandfather, the old Jewish grandfather, is like, you're either a doctor or a lawyer, pick one. Um, but that was fine. I mean, I didn't, yeah. And eventually I figured it out. Became very obvious. I
So
wasn't interested in wet, sticky stuff.
I love hearing that you were happy that almost you. I ask a lot of people who go into like the sciences, especially like international, where they don't have the liberal art classes. Do you feel like you missed out not being able to take psychology and sociology and anthropology and all those? And a lot of people say they do, right? You don't realize it at the time, but it's wonderful to hear you say that. I wanted that part of my education. I didn't want it just to be math and science.
Right. No, I was very conscious about that. I knew that I would, whatever, if I did pick either biology or computer science, I wouldn't get those other courses. So I was very conscious about that. And you mentioned psychology. I did do some psychology courses. I took philosophy classes, and I really love that. I love that stuff. So I'm really, really glad that I got to do all that other stuff.
See, I loved my anthropology and my philosophy classes to a point where there was a quick moment where I was like, I would love to just do this full time, right? And
Yeah.
then the practicality of it says, Bill, you can't do this full time.
Right, right, right. Yeah. It's,
But I mean, computer science at that time isn't. When I went to school in like '87, it was still. I went to SUNY Potsdam.
hmm
Back at the time in '87, that was like they were one of the few schools that had a considerably strong sort of computer science program that I could afford and get into at least.
hmm Yeah.
And so even like 10 years earlier than that, which is roughly where you like, it really wasn't the option, but it sounds like Harvard had something there already, at least that
Yeah,
you could consider a minor.
there were some computer science professors. The first one and the most influential was a guy named Harry Lewis, who just retired, actually. He became a dean and then he retired. But the first class I took, Applied Math 110, was in PDP-11 assembler, which is actually a beautiful assembly language. It's sort of almost like a high-level assembly language. So it was really fun to learn that after coming from BASIC.
But did you do that on paper? Because I think I had told you I went. Well, that's good.
Yeah, by the time, oh, sorry, I should have said that there was still a PDP-11 shared among 40 computers, but at least they were all in the same room, and they were screens. So I learned how to use VI, and we typed our programs in, and were able to run them, and it was fine. Never
No,
ran
that's
into
good.
64K boundaries. Nothing was very big. So
But what
uh,
kind of programs? Do you remember like what kind of
yeah,
programs you're writing on the
yeah.
PDP-11?
So in that very first course, this is the first course, freshman year, maybe spring or maybe fall, I can't remember. First course, we wrote a Lisp interpreter and That was the most sophisticated thing we wrote. That was the last thing. But we wrote a lot of stuff in PDP-11 assembler. And then I took a compilers course. We wrote an Ada compiler, like a baby. Ada is a very, very big language, but we wrote like a baby Ada compiler. So I learned compilers, parsers, and all that stuff. I think those were the biggest things I wrote. And there were a lot of data structure courses. I remember the one all-nighter. I was pretty good with time management. I never, a lot of people just spend all night in the computer room a lot. I did it once, getting my hash tables to work. That was the one time I pulled the all-nighter. But yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff. Those are the three that I remember: Lisp interpreter, compiler, and hash tables.
I never understood the thing about Lisp and Prolog at that academic, because even they made me learn Lisp and Prolog. I hated Lisp, hated it. Like, I didn't understand it. To me, it was nothing I was ever going to use in a practical sense to build something. And I just felt it was a total waste. And I had to do like the Towers of Hanoi with
Yeah.
Lisp. Jonathan, I lost my mind, man. I lost
So
my mind.
the difference is that I never thought I was going to become a working programmer. In fact, I was a real haughty, pretentious snob about that. I have to tell you. Um, and I just thought, I'm not going to be one of those unwashed masses of working programmers. I'm going to be an academic and I'm going to do science because I'm a scientist. And I'm just learning this stuff to like do computer science. So it never bothered me that it was impractical. In fact, I love the fact that it was impractical because it was so elegant and beautiful. Because the programs are the data. There's a lot of cool stuff about Lisp that's, again, not practical.
But you thought going into university, I guess you were going to do undergraduate, master's, get your PhD, and stay sort of in academics, or like you're going to be working at Harvard in
Well,
8 years or something.
I don't know if I'd
Like,
be a professor at Harvard, but I hope to be a professor somewhere. Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you do any internships in that first 4 years at Harvard?
I did. It was a summer program at IBM. Yeah. Where I didn't do any of the stuff they wanted me to do. I just wrote another Lisp interpreter, this time in APL. It
Wow,
was like
that's wild.
10 lines. APL is this famously terse language where you can, no, I remember the garbage collector was 2 lines of code, something like that.
So they didn't throw you into some practical group that you worked with that
No,
they could.
never did anything practical. Again,
Wow.
my interests were not practical, which was
So then,
obviously a terrible mistake at the time. But yeah,
so what degree are you graduating with as you finish Harvard then?
BA, because there's no BS. There's no Bachelor of Science degree. It's Bachelor of Arts at Harvard. So that's what I got.
But with a major in what, mathematics or
No, applied mathematics. Yeah,
applied mathematics? Okay. So then, so you do your 4 years, you graduate on time, you've got your BA in applied mathematics.
so not exactly.
Okay.
So I took off. Yes, you talked about internships, and I skipped over an important semester because this was a while ago, Bill. So I'm dredging it back out. I worked with a guy named Carl Hewitt at MIT. The actor languages were his baby. I was able to get this sort of intern. It was like a paid gig for a semester.
Nice. For the whole semester.
Yeah, yeah, I took up a whole semester. It was both. I figured it was something that I was interested in, and to see if I wanted to do research, and also, it would hopefully get me into MIT if that's where I wanted to go. So that was really, really fun.
Was that at MIT, or was that like some company that he was
No, it
working
was
at?
MIT.
It
No,
was at MIT.
it was MIT, what was called MIT AI Lab. But the AI that they were doing would be unrecognizable today. It's not what we call AI. But this programming language thing, the actor languages are still influential in some ways. It's kind of an object-oriented language, or everything's an object and they talk to each other with messages. It's sort of the usual object-oriented spiel. Yeah, so I did that, and then I had an extra semester in a way. I was sort of halfway done, so my parents, I guess, paid to go to an extra semester at Harvard. They let me do that, where I took like just all literature classes, because again, I knew that I would never have this chance again. So I just took like 4 classes and all sorts of stuff that I was never going to do again, and I never did again.
So you were done with your requirements basically, but you
Yep,
had what, like
yep.
15 credits left that you had to sort of fulfill.
Yes. Yeah. So no, I didn't have anything to fulfill. This was just extra. I could
This
have
was just
graduated halfway.
I okay.
I think. Oh no, maybe you're right. You know what? I don't remember. You're probably right. I probably needed more classes.
Because you took the semester off, which is
Yeah,
about
right.
15 credits. So you didn't get any credit for the MIT stuff. But I guess at the
Maybe.
end of the day,
I didn't think of it,
switching to MIT. No, well,
but you're probably right. I probably.
I think of everything now as a father, right? So all I'm thinking is, damn it, Jonathan, what are you doing, man? You're just
So
like,
first of all, the price of the school was 1 quarter. Like the in my entire 4 years or 4.5 years was 1 year now. So it was a lot cheaper. Then I applied for graduate schools and I got into MIT and that's where I went.
do you think that did that semester you think help you, or it was didn't matter?
Probably.
Right? Yeah. So what were you going to do for your master's then? So you decide you're not ready for industry. You're still focused on this idea of being in this sort of academic world, teaching or
Yep.
something. That's still there in your head. So
Yep.
you apply to MIT.
22 or 23, 22, I guess. Still very pretentious, very snobby about anything practical. Wanted to do general AI. This at the MIT lab at this point, there were people like Marvin Minsky, who is like one of the fathers of AI. Um, and he wanted to understand the way the mind worked in general terms, and I was excited by that idea. But
What did AI look like? Because at this
yeah,
point you're talking like what, 83, 80.
yeah. So there were a bunch of disciplines. So now AI is what we would call just machine learning. Um, I mean the I mean I'm sure there's people doing all the other stuff I'm going to talk about, but you don't hear about them. They're firmly academia. And so there was machine learning then, although it was more symbol based. It wasn't this idea that you feed a neural net billions of examples. Those ideas were there, but no one, they were completely impractical because how are you going to get even a million examples of something? You're going to have somebody grade a million different things, or how are you going to
Everything
get
was on paper, right?
no
Like,
internet, not paper.
yeah.
No, we had computers. We had
Yeah,
computers.
but
There was an
okay.
internet. It was called the ARPANET, but there were maybe 1,000 people on it.
Right, that's what I'm saying. The majority of the information we had was on paper at that time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was no,
Yeah, yeah.
and not even paper. Like people weren't clicking on screens. It wasn't a million or a billion people clicking on screens and giving you a data point every time they clicked. There's just no way to collect that amount of data. So the data intensive AI that we have now is just completely impractical. So people focused on fancy algorithms and very influenced by computer science. The sort of logic or math aspect of computer science. People focused a lot on logic. So that was one. And then there were different subdisciplines. There was robotics and vision. Around the time I was there, vision started to get very mathy. There was this guy named David Marr who tried to turn vision from this not goofy, but this sort of thing like, oh, let's just write these ad hoc algorithms to look for lines to let's do this math on the bits and the pixels of the image. I don't understand that stuff, but it was a transformation there. Robotics started getting more mathy, and that and now machine learning is like that. It's there's deep math under all that.
Here at Ardan Labs, we believe in empowering companies to reach their full potential through innovative technology solutions. Trusted by small startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, we specialize in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, development, and now AI. With over 14 years of experience, Ardan Labs has trained over 30,000 engineers and served over 1,000 companies worldwide. Whether you're mastering Go, Rust, Kubernetes, Terraform, or blockchain, we're your strategic partner for performance-grade solutions. Let's elevate your tech journey together. Reach out to Ardan Labs today.
But
But
what
I
were
was
you interested in?
yeah.
Like, what were you excited about going
Yeah,
into
well, the
that
thing I was
program?
excited about this general AI wasn't a thing that you could do. So what was the first group I joined? I think it was Patrick Winston, who was a machine learning guy. I think I was in his group. I moved around a lot, so it took me so that there was people who did linguistics, but again, not the data intensive way we do today, but trying to use grammar to parse languages and so that was something I was interested in, but I didn't join that group. And the fact is, I didn't really get anything done. I mean, my master's actually happened to be in in another part of the department, not the AI lab, where they were doing this mathematical machine learning stuff, which is still a discipline today, which wasn't really what I wanted to be doing, but that's kind of where I ended up. And then I just floundered for years. And I finally was able to get my PhD 10 years after I started, well, way too long, doing something in what we called qualitative physics, which means instead of plugging in the numbers to simulate a system, you kind of try to understand it qualitatively, like this goes up, therefore this must go down, that kind of thing. If you add water to this tube, the pressure is going to go up, and therefore the other side of the tube, the water on the other side is going to rise up. Just causation like that, not really, you don't need numbers for that, you just kind of think it through. So there was a lot of work on that I finally ended up getting interested in enough to do something. It wasn't much. And
Was there anything practical around that? Or
there
these
were,
all...
there were people in that field who were working with, they built like training systems, like you could teach engineers about these things, because engineers learn to think that way before they, in addition to or before they get into the detailed numbers. You have to kind of think qualitatively, as we all do about our systems, right? We don't need to run the thing to know that if you make a lot of requests, you're going to use more RAM, or something like that. So there were somewhat practical applications of it.
But what are you doing? Okay, it takes you 10 years to do the PhD, but you have to be working at that point, right? You need money. You're not working.
I was supported throughout my first by Office of Naval Research grant, and then I don't know. I mean, I was working as a teaching assistant, which was very rewarding and fun. So they would give me some money for that, and my parents had helped me, with an apartment and a car. So I mean, I wasn't doing well. Like I would go to the dining hall somewhere and get wrap up extra food. I wasn't I mean, I was very comfortable, but making 2 meals out of one didn't really bother me at that point. Two tuna fish sandwiches instead of one.
So are you at the end excited to get this done, or bummed out that it's done? No.
So what I should have done, what any smart person would have done, is drop out. Because it's the fallacy of sunk cost. I'd spent all this time, but that was the past. I should just move forward. But I, was determined. My father had a PhD. I was just determined to get the PhD. So I just knuckled down, and in 6 months, I took whatever scraps of work I had done and I wrote it up. And I squeaked through.
So what year is this? This is 88,
1992, I believe.
92. Okay.
Yeah.
So you get it done. You got your PhD. You're ready to go teach now at Harvard, right?
Get an academic job. Yeah. Yeah. Well, get an academic job somewhere, but of course no one would hire me because my work I did was not good, and I had no real track record of published papers. I published a couple of papers on stuff that wasn't really that, I guess, not that exciting. So I had a friend on Wall Street, and prior to this, I had gone down to him and worked on something. Again, it was like writing a compiler for something. So it ended up being those instruments that caused the financial crisis in 2008. They're called mortgage-backed securities, and what's interesting about them is they're actually little programs. Each one of these financial instruments is a little program that says, let's carve up this bunch of mortgages into little slices, and this one pays off, and if this one pays off, you go there and you do that, and they're little constrained programs. So there was a language for that I wrote a compiler for. And that was really fun. I used a programming language called Rex, REXX, which was IBM's scripting language. It was like a scripting language for IBM computers. It was interesting.
On what, like an IBM 36 or something?
It was some sort of IBM computer. I don't remember what it was.
I never heard of Rex. This is the first time in my life.
Yeah, Google it. It was a fun little language. It was kind of cool. So after I graduated and nothing was materializing, he's like, well, we can hire you. This was a company called Lehman Brothers. Some of you may remember Lehman Brothers. Which doesn't exist anymore because of that same financial crisis in 2008. But
now you had to go to New York City, or that was in Boston?
Oh, that wasn't a hat. I was delighted to go to New York City. after 10 years in Boston. So yeah, I moved to New York. I got, I
It
was
had to
now
be.
getting paid.
I don't want the number, but I mean, that had to be a good paying job
I was
for
going to say,
Zoom. And
I was getting paid more than, it's no more two tuna fish sandwiches out of one anymore. Like I was able to afford a nice one bedroom apartment with a view of the Statue of Liberty, 2 blocks from the office in the World Financial Center in a beautiful area called Battery Park City. Um,
and your
and
parents said he's finally off the payroll. This is great.
yeah, yep, my
Good
parents
job,
were
Jonathan.
thrilled. They were thrilled. Well, they sold the apartment they bought from me for a profit. So, I mean, they've got something out of it. But
But that's exciting. I mean, how old are you at this point? You're 28 or something like that, 30?
yeah, I'm like
Yeah.
28, 29. And that's when,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was, I'm talking about the outside stuff, but what was going on inside was I finally had to realize, and I think a lot of people have this feeling when they're about 30, that everything I thought about what I was completely wrong. Um, and I wasn't this, scientist who's just above everybody else. I was an engineer, and I came to accept that, and I became very proud to be an engineer. That's nothing to, as we know now, that is a very noble profession, and it's nothing to be ashamed about. It's something to be proud about, as I am now. So it took me a while to make that transition.
So my guess then is, at the time you took this job, did you feel a bit like a failure? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I felt that it was some time between when I finished the PhD, and I was so focused on just writing that thesis and getting out. And then, yeah, I don't remember my exact state of mind, but at some point I realized, I don't know if I ever considered myself a failure, maybe, but I think I was more, what's the word, psychologically flexible or something than that. I think I was able to turn that into what I just said, that I was, scientists are great. I'm not one. That's not who I am. So the failure was more failure in self-awareness.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
never was. I was always the guy who went to the lab where there was science and hacked something up. And I finally like, oh yeah, duh, that's who I am.
Yeah, you were turning all this stuff into some practical
Yeah, I was
use.
doing.
You weren't.
And the most
Yeah.
fun I had in graduate school was when I was writing these big Lisp programs to do whatever the research was really supposed to be. That's where I was really satisfied and energized and productive. So, yep, I moved to this financial company, Lehman Brothers, and started writing code there. I didn't understand the finance. I didn't want to learn the finance, but I wrote a lot of, like a date library and C++, a lot of C++ there. The Rex stuff was kind of a one-off. The shop itself was C++ financial stuff.
But that's not the first time you're seeing C and C++. I imagine you saw it in university too. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't use it, but I did, it was sort of exciting at the time to see that.
What blows my mind is I was doing C and C++ in the 80s, early 90s. It is nothing like what C++ is today. I feel like I
Right.
can't even read it anymore. It's
Yeah.
gotten so complex with syntax, and it's not it's not your dad's C++.
I'm not quite old enough to be your dad, but yeah, I think, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. No, I remember when when Stroustup's first, not the thick book, but there was a much thinner book, like there was an introduction. And that was I had learned C back in college. Yeah, one of the formative experiences as a programmer, if we can go back a bit, was the summer after freshman year. I think I was like working at the computer lab in the psychology department. I can't remember how I got there, but that's when I read Kernahan and Ritchie. I don't know if you ever read that
I
beautiful,
had that book. Yeah,
beautiful,
I had that book in high school. Yeah.
just a beautiful book about a beautiful language. At the time, it was a very beautiful thing.
I didn't appreciate the book at the time because my mind wasn't at the level it is now. Like now I can look back on it and say it was really like well done. But at the time, my brain wasn't at a level where I could. I knew who it was written. Now I can look back and I know who it was written for. It wasn't written for Bill in like 19 like
You had to
87.
already have done a lot of programming to get anything of that. Like otherwise, why would you care about writing a memory allocator? Like why would that be an interesting problem to you if you already hadn't done a lot of programming? So, but for me, it was just perfect. And, there were all these thick books, I don't know. They didn't have all those series that they do today, learn C++ in 21 days or something. But there's a lot of thick stuff. And this was just beautifully a thin book. It was so delightfully written. I love that. And that's like the gold standard for me for computer science textbooks. So I learned C, and I used C for many years. And so when C++ came out, combining object-orientedness with C, I loved the idea. I didn't really get much of a chance to use it until I went to Lehman Brothers, and then I was using it. Again, it was the older C++ that a single person could wrap their mind around.
How long were you at Lehman Brothers for? How long did you stay at that gig?
So what happened to me, I would have stayed much longer, but I think it might have been 4 or 5 years, maybe less. I started having hand trouble, and I didn't address it properly, and so I had to stop coding.
Like carpal tunnel stuff? Or?
Yeah, that wasn't the right diagnosis. Nobody knew what the diagnosis. And I tried everything. I tried, acupuncture and massage, and I went to a physiatrist who's a doctor who specializes in that stuff. And
was it just a lot of pain where you couldn't type? Or?
I couldn't type. Oh. But I still tried to type through the pain. So number one thing, don't type through the pain. And so at that point, Java was coming out. I was very excited about Java. It seemed like a great...
But now you got to type more, Jonathan. No.
I didn't quite have the same ridiculously long variable names and abstract factory things that they do today. That was before that part of that culture became established. And it was just a very simple, elegant language that, clearly had simplified so much about C++. I loved it. So I became a Java trainer because a lot of companies were trying to learn it. So I developed, like 600 PowerPoint slides.
So wait a second. So you have to quit Lehman because you just can't work anymore. And what? So during some sort of rehab that you're doing, you start learning.
I had to make money, so I figured I could train people in Java. So,
but you still have to build all this material.
Yeah.
Like
so I did
you got to use your hand.
I did it with a program called Drag and Dictate, which is the precursor to a lot of these voice programs. I was able to do a little bit with that. It was very painful. I hired people. I would talk to them and they would type things.
That's amazing.
Yep.
And you built a whole Java sort of curriculum.
I must have been able to type a little bit. I mean, I couldn't have written the programs. I must have been able to write some demo programs. And maybe before my hands went out, I had already been playing with it. That must have been true. I don't remember the details.
So what year is this then? This is like 96, 97.
Maybe. That sounds about right. Yeah, it must have been there, 95 maybe. Can't remember.
So you spend like 6 months building out this course, but how are you finding your clients?
Well, I tried to do it myself, but that's not my strong suit. I wish I knew you at that time. You could have hired me. But I did have there was a guy who was a little better at it, and he hired me for some gigs. And I don't know, I had 1 or 2 gigs on my own. I just put stuff together and got
Did you enjoy that? So now you're doing corporate level training, teaching.
I did enjoy it. I do love teaching, as you know, as do you. So I did do that. I did enjoy that. I was able to make a decent living. And then, I was doing it. In fact, I was teaching in downtown Brooklyn at Chase or something when the planes hit the World Trade Center.
So you were training that day?
It was like the lunch break, and I'm like, I guess we're not going to finish the class today. And I walked back from Brooklyn. There was no transportation. So the geography is that I was across the river. I didn't actually see the planes hit, but we could see smoke and stuff. And we weren't directly affected by all the debris. But I had to walk home to my apartment in Brooklyn, where my wife and my 6-month-old kid were. And there was you could see little scraps of things falling from the sky. And that sort of ended that career because no one was hiring consultants to teach them for a while.
So at that point, you're married as well. I remember seeing that. I was already in Miami, and I remember just waking up in the morning and getting ready to go to work and seeing it on the TV. And being from New York, now wondering what family is where, because I did have a brother-in-law at the time who still works downtown at the courthouse. He's like one of those court officers. And then I had direct TV in my office at work. That was always my requirement. I needed a TV in my office. I just needed the distraction.
Yeah.
And everybody's like surrounded. Everybody's around my TV before I even get to work. Everybody's in my office watching the TV. It was crazy. It was crazy. But you were teaching in Brooklyn at the time, or you were teaching on Manhattan? No, you were in Brooklyn at the time. I didn't think there was corporate in Brooklyn. I thought my brain always felt like that was just residential in Brooklyn.
There was an area called Metro Tech Center that was circled around a university that I can't remember what it was.
Well, that was fortunate too then, that you
Yeah,
have a job in Brooklyn at the time. Yeah.
I
So
had
that dries up after that. Like you can't teach anymore.
not like
So
I found a headhunter and was able to get. I told him I can't really program full time. At that point, I think I could do a little typing. So he got me like a tech. I don't know what you call this role in the world.
so wait a second.
Yeah, sure.
In this 2001, like your hands are still hurting. You're never able to find, at least up to this point.
Yeah, and I tried everything. I even tried the Reiki where they don't even touch you, and Rolfing.
Wow.
And
Is it like arthritis at this point? I mean,
the general diagnosis is repetitive stress injury, which doesn't mean anything. So I don't think we ever knew what it was, but eventually what I ended up, I can't remember how I figured out to fix it, but it's sort of like, I don't know if you see how now it's this. It's like just lean back and put your shoulders back and have good ergonomics and build your back muscles up so that you're not like this all the time. Because I think really what it was, I never really got a good diagnosis, was like this thing was cutting off
a circulation issue,
nerves or something. It wasn't really the hands. It feels like it's the hands, but it's not.
Oh.
So it was just good posture. It's like the answer.
But you got to be so stressed because you got to get back to work. You got to make money. You're a programmer at heart and your hands aren't working. I can't even imagine.
I was less depressed than I was that time in grad school I was telling you about, but it was stressful. But I did find this job with a company called Data Synapse that was like doing grid software, which is kind of the precursor to cloud software, like distributed software.
What were your credentials for that job though? Like what were you don't have any real.
They took a chance on me because of my hands. So I went into the interview and I guess I did good because I'm technically pretty okay. And, I had the PhD from MIT, whatever. So, and I had these years at Lehman where I did a lot of coding and
Okay.
I don't know.
Were you interested in this idea of what would become cloud computing? Were you interested in that? Because it's not, it feels opsy to me more than.
No, there was a lot of coding involved and it was an interesting product, distributing your workload. And it also had a clever ability to suck up cycles on like all the Windows boxes in your office that aren't being used at night. Like you can do all these computations while everyone's home for the night, suck up all these idle cycles. So,
so the idea was to build a little piece of software like an agent that would run on these boxes that you could feed, go make this calculation, make this calculation. Was that the idea?
Well, the agent would, yes, there would be a central thing that would feed these things work, and they would do it. Sort of like SETI at Home, which was a project around that time where you could help the SETI project analyze data if you just install this thing on your computer. It was that idea.
No security though. Like who cares at this point? Security didn't matter. Just
when I was in graduate school, I was there at the same time. He wasn't in graduate school, but Richard Stallman, who's now famous for the Free Software Foundation and other things, but he was a stellar programmer. But his password was famously public. Because, who's going to hurt you on the internet? Nobody wants to hurt you. Yeah. So that's what we thought of security. Not much security on this thing. But it was fun to work on. I enjoyed that. It was, sort of computer sciencey, but also practical. And at some point, go ahead.
You have to go, now I guess at that point now you're commuting back into the city, right? Because with this other job, you were pretty much working
right.
from
This
home
was
until you had
this was like 2 blocks from the same subway that I lived near. So it was very easy commute. It was in Greenwich Village. It was a great area.
Oh yeah, the Village is cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It was this nice I really enjoyed my time there. Eventually my hands, slowly got a little better. as I stood straighter, sat straighter, and I was able to transition into being like a developer.
Did you just like wake up one day and realize my hands didn't hurt yesterday? Like, I'm just kind of
Uh,
curious because your
oh, it's
brain must have been.
much more subtle than that, much more gradual. I also found a really good kind of off the beaten path physical therapist who gave me these exercises that I think really helped. And that wasn't the end of it. I mean, I had recurrences and stuff, so where I had to stop working for a bit. But that was mostly. Oh, and another thing I was doing this time to make a little money was I was teaching at NYU. I got this gig as an adjunct professor at NYU, and I was teaching like algorithms and stuff. Uh,
That's cool.
yeah,
That had to be fun.
it was both fun and also like once you teach algorithms, you can pass any interview question because you know that stuff cold. So it was valuable for interviewing later. But
That's fun. I
yeah,
actually did some. I don't have the master's degree, so I couldn't teach at university. I was offered that a couple of times. I was like, but the university guys would come to my vocational classes and I would teach them
yeah,
and
you're
they'd go
probably
back
better
into the class.
yeah, better
And I
teaching.
always found that to be hilarious, man. Like,
Yeah.
you're not going to let me teach in that classroom, but I just taught your professor for the last 6 weeks.
That was a fun thing to do too.
So then what's the next gig? Like, I'm always interested in how the next gig sort of comes across somebody's
Right.
eyes.
I wasn't very ambitious or thoughtful or premeditated about any of that. I was almost pretty much wherever I was kind of happy to be there. And I was really bad at like thinking, this is good, but it could be better. I was always like, this is fine. Probably going to be worse somewhere else. um, I know
You
people,
never had
that's
you
bad.
never had thoughts of like I'm gonna grow in this company. I'm gonna climb the ladder here. I'm gonna be the CTO one day here, or none
Yeah,
of
it's
that.
interesting. I probably did, but I know now I'm still at Google. I'm still an individual contributor, and that's where I belong. I would be terrible if I had to manage anything more than like two people. Like I can manage a three-person project for like a year or 6 months, but anything like more permanent than that would just drive me crazy. So it took me a while to figure that out too. The self-awareness is always lagging behind the actual practice. But anyway, to go back to this time, the same friend who I knew at Lehman Brothers was now at a hedge fund in Connecticut, and when he heard my hands were better, he asked me to join, so I went there. Um, why did I go there? I guess it was more money. It was a change. Oh, this company, this data synapse company, was clearly almost done. They were trying to sell it. They were
So you had to look for
hailing their
something else.
last, fumes of VC capital and stuff. So I
So
knew
you have to move to Connecticut for this, or you taking that
I was
train?
able to. Did I work remotely from Brooklyn for a year? And then we moved to where I am now, which is a town in Westchester, north of Long Island, north of New York City, northeast, a town called Larchmont. That's where I'm talking to you from now. Not the same house, not the same place, but
Uh,
and it was a good move too because uh, I kind of got freaked out after 9/11 and I wanted to leave the city. So I and so I think it all happened. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure if I was freaked out. Why didn't I leave sooner? Why did I was at this company for 3 years? I can't remember the timeline very well. It's
no, it's
possible I
okay.
got this wrong and I actually switched to this company. No, it was definitely after 9/11. Anyway, I don't know. Doesn't matter. I started working for this company. I moved to Larchmont, which is a short commute on the train from this place. The company still is there. It's called Ellington Management. They specialized in the same things, the mortgage-backed securities. That brought the world down in 2008, but amazingly did not bring them down. Amazingly. Um,
That is amazing.
yeah.
I mean, I remember all that because that really impacted my life. Like, major fork in the road time for me. I had my first startup. We were sort of leveraging our capital against the market, and I, taking a big pay cut, had a line of credit on my house. Overnight, I had no more money to pay bills, and overnight, we had no more funding for the company.
Oh my
And
God.
in my first company, and I tell people this freely, like I ended up being about 250,000 in the hole from my first business. And I learned so much. Like I should have been out earlier. Like, okay, you can look back
No
at
one
that,
predicted that.
but that was the final stake that in 2008, just final stake and everything. And almost, if you look back on it, maybe I'm almost grateful it happened because I probably would have bled out even more. Right. But I'll never forget that because it was a major impact on my life at that point. Yeah.
I mean, luckily it didn't affect me financially at all because I didn't have enough money to make it. But yeah, that's harsh.
Yeah, but interesting that that company didn't suffer any consequences, even though they were in
They
the
they
middle of
were very persuasive with the investors and convinced them that, hey, with everything dirt cheap now, it's a great opportunity to stay in it. Even though they lost people lots of money. I mean, there's also this thing with hedge funds that if you don't make money, you don't have to pay their fees. The company doesn't make money for you. So I don't really understand that part. I know it was a tough time. I believe I stayed with the company after that. But at
So
some point,
you need money to make money. So if everything crashed and you still have a few hundred million, now you're buying everything. You know how many people bought a house, took the credit out of it, bought another house, took credit out of that, bought another house, and then the whole thing just unraveled, right? Now you got 3 houses on the market that are
worth
you need
nothing.
money to make money, right? So
Yeah, I don't know how they pulled off that trick. I that was not my. But what I did there was a lot of C++ and I a lot of there was a lot to do there because there was no culture of software engineering. So this major model that they had to simulate these instruments. So the way you figure out how these instruments behave, I mentioned that they're little programs, so they're complicated. You can't just mathematically analyze them. You simulate them on thousands of different scenarios. The scenarios are typically like changes in interest rates and other financial indicators because the way these things, the if statements of this program are like if rates go this, or not, they're not, but if something goes to zero, but it goes to zero because this rate is different than this other, when it goes to zero depends on the financial environment. So anyway, massive simulations. It was kind of like a cloud. One of the things I did was write a kind of like something like that grid software. I wrote my own. It was really fun to write all that code. But I mean, this massive simulation, this model that they used to like trade on had no tests, no tests, like no tests of the actual output. They would just make changes and run it and like, yeah, that looks good. So I wrote tests. I wrote,
were you using source control at that point? Because I didn't
oh
see
yes,
source control until about 95.
I think there was source control. There was source control, but there was no code review. So, and I actually didn't know about code review then. And I'm like, that's a terrible idea. It's going to slow everyone down so much. So we
Well, I
just,
thought tests were going to slow everybody down too much too.
right.
And now I look back on it thinking, what a
What were we thinking?
ignorant sort of, yeah.
We were cowboys. Yeah, so it was fun for a while to be the soft. There was another couple of people who were software engineers at heart. One guy was more than me. He was writing unit tests for everything, and I'm like, that's stupid. But he was better than I was in that regard. But eventually, it was sort of exhausting to. Um, it was a typical, office where people talked about stuff I wasn't interested in, and I didn't really have any buddies there. Nobody really got me. A couple of the other programmers, so I was a little isolated. I still enjoyed the work. And then my friend, who had gone to Google a few years earlier, said, Jonathan, I put in it was this recruiter from Google who called me out of the blue. I can tell you exactly when this was because I've been at Google a certain number of years. And so it's minus that number.
So you got the anonymous Google recruiter email.
Yeah, right. I've been at Google 14 years. So this was 14 years ago.
Are you on isn't LinkedIn even a thing? What is this now? So you're saying it's like
I think there
2000,
was a LinkedIn.
2011?
Crucially, this was post Google IPO, unfortunately. or I'd be talking to you from my mansion on this shore. So anyway, they called me. I'm like, sure, I'll interview, but you're not going to be able to match my financial, sector
Yeah.
salary. But what the
Yeah.
hell? It'll be a fun day. So go there. Love the interviews. They're really fun. They ask binary
They
tree
flew you to
questions.
San Francisco. I mean,
No, this was in New York. There was a New York office. In fact, the
okay.
the big one. I know you've been there. I've seen you there. The
Yeah.
Chelsea.
Yeah.
That was there. That was
Oh, okay.
they had already recently bought that building.
Nice. Okay.
Um,
So that's easy. Yeah, I'll go down and
yeah,
see.
and they asked me questions that I nailed because I had taught algorithms. Uh, so it was really fun.
But you kind of went into this interview like, whatever, I'll do it, but you
Yeah,
weren't nervous or
it was a
stressed
fun
because
day.
you didn't care. Yeah.
Right. And then, they made me an offer, and the salary was like, yeah, forget it. And then they're like, oh, but there's stock, and we can give you stock that matches your current salary. So then I had a frenzied couple of weeks where I started interviewing everywhere to make sure I wasn't just picking this one thing and what other opportunities are there. I interviewed with other financial companies. One I got pretty far along on until I realized that their entire shop was a Windows shop. And I'm like, I'm out. Not happening. And I also just started to love the idea that I'd never have to think about mortgage-backed securities again. And I could
Yeah.
work with people who cared about software engineering.
Well, did they tell you what you'd be doing there, or it was
They
just
never tell you what you'll be doing because you don't
Okay.
know. Because I'm sure there are people who are hired for expertise in particular things. Most of the people they hire are generalists, like me, and so it's like they don't even know until you get there and somebody picks your name out of a hat or however they do it.
But it wasn't going to be financial algorithms. You knew that.
Nope,
You
not
knew
if I
that.
can. Um,
But it's interesting that you said, okay, Google decided to hire me. How long did that take? Was that a couple months
yeah, it
process, or
wasn't
was it
that long.
fast?
Yeah, it was maybe a couple of months. It was
All
pretty
right. And then your brain went, I wonder what else is out there. If Google is so willing to hire me, there's got to be other companies. The allure of Google at the time wasn't enough to just say, because I always feel like there's an allure around working at Google, right?
Sure. And there was, but this time I tried to, like, instead of just going from one thing to the next thing, as I had done my whole career, I'm like, let me try to, like, at least look around a bit. And the company made me a counter offer once I told them I was leaving, which was agonizing. Before I knew they were going to make me a counter offer, and I'm like, there's a number they could offer me that would make me stay. I would be, much more comfortable and miserable. I really, really hope they don't say that number. And luckily they did not. The number there was no question. But then I had agonizing talks with my wife. I'm going from this stable thing to who knows what it'll be like, and I'll have to commute back into the city. And we left the city because of 9/11, and now I'm commuting back into it. This was before, of course, any remote work. I was going to be going in 5 days a week. So it was actually very hard for me to make this change. But I did, and I
What
went.
was the final thing that made you do it? What was just you thought the work
Just
would be?
my wife was on board. She was happy with me doing it. I didn't know, this for me. It's always like it could be much worse. So I didn't know. I just took the leap. I'm like, this could be amazing.
I mean, it's definitely stable. It wasn't like you're going to a startup.
No, that's true. I mean, I knew at that point. I mean, I had 2 kids, in elementary school and stuff, and there was no way I could like do a startup. I was
Unlike me, I did my first startup with 5 kids, the youngest being like a year old.
Yeah, but that's nothing to you. 5 kids. You got 7 now, and you're still
No, I know. My dad used to
figured out how
say
to
to me,
multitask. When
my
you
dad
now?
thought I was crazy, man. And my dad would always or I saw him, he would just shake his head like, I don't know how you're doing it. Like my dad couldn't do it. My dad worked at Grumman and he was a musician. And he loved his music so much that he watched all his friends become VPs, executive VPs. And he didn't want it because he wanted to be home and he wanted to play his music. My dad never cared about like money and that sort of growth, right? And so me sort of pushing myself to generate as much income as I could for the kids, it never equated to him like, what are you doing? It's just like interesting.
Yeah.
But I fully understand. You're like, yeah, I got kids. I can't be. You know what it was for me is that I knew if I worked for somebody, I could never generate enough income to support them. That was my brain, right? I had to take these risks in order to be able to generate that level of income I wanted to support the kids. I didn't think I could do it working for somebody.
Yeah. I never, I always wanted to make more money, but I was also very conscious, like my wife and I agreed to stop at 2 kids because, just because, for financial reasons. Also, as you know, as soon as you get past 2, you have to switch from man to man to zone defense. No,
Yeah.
but really, it was a conscious financial decision. And also, yeah, I mean, whatever. I mean, I grew up in a family of 2 kids. So people often, how big was your birth family? How many kids?
I have 4 sisters, but my youngest sister's like 17 years younger.
Oh,
My
interesting.
parents had a kid when I was like 17, which was crazy. I was hoping for all sisters. I was like, I'm gonna have my brother. I'm gonna have my brother, and that didn't happen. So yeah, I mean,
So you come from,
Italian, Irish, Italian. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of kids. So, so you go through the orientation, and then they assign you to a group. So what was that?
yeah, the orientation was so much fun. Super pumped. They assigned me to this group in ads. And I'm like, okay,
The
it's what
money
is
maker. There it
finance?
is.
But yeah. And again, I did this, long story short, I stupidly stayed there because I figured, well, I'm miserable, but probably anywhere else in Google, I'm going to be even more miserable. Same dumb stuff.
So that's hilarious. So they put you in ads and algorithms now around all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the algorithms were already baked in. That wasn't going to be what I was working on. Frankly, they were too sophisticated for me anyway, the auction theory. And it was a lot of C++, and I had to kind of try to learn this business, which just never stuck in my head. I just couldn't learn it. I was trying to learn it. I was 50 years old at this point, which might have had something to do with the challenge of learning it, but also wasn't something I was interested in. And the coding was it's very unsatisfying. The only bright spot was Go was just starting to come into use at Google, and I was not able to use it in production, but I could use it to write little tools and stuff, and that was a joy. Go ahead, you were
But
gonna.
even like at that time, 50, are you around a lot younger people? I would imagine that 50 is still young there. No. So you were around like 25 to 35 year
30,
olds.
all those
Yeah,
kids, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was
How does Go get on your radar there? How does that just happen? It just internally, it just starts showing up here and there.
when I first heard about it. I was still at the hedge fund. I can't remember. I mean, I guess I was reading Slashdot at the time, probably. And I found out about it, and Go One was released. And I remember a funny story. I Just around the time it was released, we went on a family cruise. I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise ship, but the internet, they tried to bleed you every possible way. I mean, it's very cheap to get on there, but everything else is an upsell. And the internet is a massive upsell. They charge you like $1 a minute or something. And maybe it's expensive for them, I don't know. But anyway, they charge you. And I'm like, I'm paying this money and going on the forums and reading about Go and responding to things. I don't know if any of those old posts are still around, but I was just completely obsessed with it, to the extent that I would pay all this money for the internet on this cruise ship for like a week. Yeah, so it was very much on my radar. When I got to Google, they were starting to write internal API, implementations of a lot of the internal APIs needed to run Google production services, but it still wasn't quite allowed in production. So I was following it very closely. Yeah, so that's how I knew
So,
about it.
so here's the life hack, at least on Virgin with Wi-Fi. If you use your VPN, for some reason, they don't block it.
Oh,
Oh, so I
try
don't
that.
have to upgrade the Wi-Fi because the VPN lets me access everything, and it's fast enough for like programming and basic reading and stuff. Crazy, right?
Well, next time I'm in the unfortunate position of being on a cruise ship, I will try that.
I've gotten it to work on airplanes too at times, where they give you the free Wi-Fi level and then like, VPN through. It's just crazy. I use that Express VPN, man. It's such a great service. All right, so how long are you doing the ad stuff, and then what's your next transition?
The ads is 3 years. I finally, and my performance was not great, so it was going to be hard to like dig myself out of that. But I did manage to get on a team that was doing an API for something, and it was just, at that point, I was like, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. It was so much fun, and I kind of never looked back. I've been on several teams, often involved with. So the next team after that was building Go uh, Go SDKs, Go APIs, Go implementations of a lot of Google services. So like a lot of them were already written, like Google Cloud Storage and BigQuery and stuff. But I wrote a few other ones.
But that's exciting, right? You
This code
finally.
is still in use today. Probably makes millions of queries on Google daily or weekly or something. So it's
But
exciting.
it's the first time since you were teaching that you finally got to do something other than like financial algorithms at some level.
Or ads, yeah. The ad
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah, yeah,
I was
yeah.
on the reporting thing, so it was like very
Uh,
cut and dried algorithms. But it was, yeah, right. It was maybe the first time at Google that I was really, really having fun. Well, no, the thing after ads was really fun. That was actually, so what that turned into was, um, I think it was called code.google.com. It was a hosted service, essentially a GitHub competitor. But then we turned it down. We still have a hosted service called GitOnBorg, which is used externally by Android and the Go project and other things. But
but that was all Go programming now. You got to start using
yeah,
Go.
I got to
What
start.
version of Go is this? Is this like
Um,
one
1.3,
1.3,
1.4.
1.4?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
remember.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
pretty old. But the language is, as we know, almost totally unchanged from then. All that code is still, you have to replace probably interface, open curly, close curly with any. And maybe there's a place, they recently added iterators to that code that I wrote on the Google Cloud Service stuff. But pretty much the same code, which is very
yeah.
cool.
No, no, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Between like the 100 blog posts that I have and the books and the training, like
They're
people
also,
are like, that video is like 5 years old. And I'm like, yeah, and it's still very, very, very relevant because I never taught the internals of things. A couple internals that have changed, like the way append works now, right? But I stayed away from the internals and stayed with the semantics, and I've gotten very lucky. But I have to convince somebody every once in a while. I'm like, I know that video is 5 years old, but trust me, like, doesn't have to be redone.
yeah,
It's beautiful. It's
yeah,
beautiful.
it's really, really satisfying. Um,
So, so tell me, like, how do you get from there to the Go team? Because that's exciting, right?
yeah, I never had the guts to actually apply for a position on the Go team, but what happened was, so I was sort of Go adjacent because I was writing these Go APIs. In fact, they invited me to some things and stuff. So I was sort of Samir Ajmani, who's the manager of the Go team, kind of knew me through that. Um, then what happened? I think the next thing that happened was, oh, yeah. So there was uh, so I had this reputation, deserve it or not, as someone who was, good with APIs and SDKs and stuff like that. So they were building a something called Go Cloud. What was it called? It had a funny name. The Cloud SDK that was supposed to be a cloud agnostic
Yes,
way.
I remember that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I remember that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
people
yeah,
still
yeah.
use it. I probably shouldn't talk publicly about why that's not currently
Yeah, you
actively
don't have to.
maintained. It is maintained by one hero kind of guy, but yeah, it was a cool idea. One, it was, I thought the design was pretty clever. Those things usually are horrible when you try to write one API that does, this the intersection of all the other products that you're wrapping. But this one came out okay, and I did some fun work on that. I wrote like abstract layer for a document store that worked with like MongoDB and with whatever Amazon's offering is and our thing. That was a satisfying design project. And then, that brought me even closer to the Go team. I actually think it was part of the Go team at that point. And then the next thing is the great Julie Qiu. Remember that name. She was just starting out, and Samir gave her the job of writing this replacement for, I don't even remember what it's called, Godoc. Remember Godoc, the document server. A more heavyweight replacement. The main reason we had to get rid of that was licensing issues, because it was displaying code that kind of could potentially expose Google to lawsuits just because we were showing code that didn't have the right license. I went through a whole phase of learning more than I ever wanted to know about licenses at one point. But anyway, she was an amazing developer, but also an amazing organizer. So Samir invited me to join the Go team proper and work on package site, pkg.go.dev, with Julie and another great engineer named Rob Findley, who I still work with on and off to this day. Julie has moved on and up in Google. Anyway, so worked on package site for 3 years, and then I've just been working on other fun stuff at Google. It's definitely been a lot of people peak early. I'm still peaking, still happy.
So I love Julie, by the way.
Oh,
She's
you
awesome.
Yeah.
And because of the stuff I've done over the last, I don't know, 10 years, I've gotten to know a lot of people from Google on the Go team. And I just remember, like, you just came out of nowhere one day. Like I didn't even know you were on the team, and you showed up at a conference and you were doing all these things. And I'm like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
And then I started seeing what you were doing. But I find it, my question is, you were on the Go team for several years before you sort of made yourself publicly known. Like, talk a little bit about that. Like, why, when, and why?
I wish I could say it was a deliberate strategy of some kind, but so what happened, I think the first thing I did was this tool called API diff, which some people still use, which was a really interesting exercise in thinking about what a breaking change is in Go. So the superficial way, and in fact, the Go repo itself has a very simple tool that just kind of prints out the signatures of everything and diffs them and decides if it's a breaking change effectively. And I realized that it's really a lot more subtle than that. So after somebody gave a talk about something, this is what happens. I nerd snipe myself, or someone nerd snipes me, and I just go into a deep sort of fugue state.
Go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, for 2 weeks. And I have the time of my life writing code. And yeah, now my hand problems are gone, so I can code. I don't often have the energy, interest, or brain power to code for 8 hours a day anymore. But when I get into those states, I'm just waking up early and coding all the time. So I wrote this, and a lot of thinking went into that. So I wrote this very fun thing called API diff that really tried to think deeply about what a breaking change is. And that code is so clever that I can no longer understand it. But I gave a fun talk about that. So I think that was maybe when you first would have seen me. And, as I've said all along, when I was teaching at NYU, I love to be on stage and talk. So it wasn't like it wasn't a hard choice to decide to do these talks. As once I had something to talk about, because I had nerd sniped myself, I was very, very happy to try to talk about it. And then luckily, I got the opportunity. I think I just raised my hand before anyone else when they said, we need a structured logging library. I'll do it. So I got that opportunity. And then Russ Cox said, you did a good job on that. Wait, this is one other thing, this serve-muck. We want to make serve-mucks patterns better. I'm like, sure. And unfortunately, there's nothing like that in the pipeline right now. And I haven't been moving towards it, but I am doing the MCP stuff. But anyway, so yeah, I love the conferences. They've really become a really important part of my career. And the last one that we were at in Berlin was definitely the best for me. But yeah.
The structured log, I felt, sort of came out of nowhere because,
it didn't.
What's interesting.
We had it on our radar. It was one of the things in the survey that people said they really wanted from Go. And also the opportunity was to do something, and the ecosystem was very fragmented on that. There were a lot of different ones. People were just making up new ones all the time. So we saw an opportunity to kind of bring people together.
See, that's interesting to me because on the early days of Go, the team was very like wanted to be hands off on everything. Like, we don't want to solve that problem. The community should solve that problem. And logging was kind of one of those things always, right?
And it was that until it became clear that with a small amount of applied effort, the community solved the problem too well in too many different ways. And it was certainly a core problem. It wasn't like, some random spec that would help 20% of the people. It was going to help 80% of the people. So, yeah, we could have not done it, but we had the bandwidth and we decided to do it. I mean, it was never I never was working on it full time. I was doing other stuff, which is why it took me like a year, or maybe more. I can't even remember now. But
those two projects that you did, basically, like on all my projects, I was using Zap and I was using HTTP Treemux, right? And then overnight, like I get those projects ripped out, and now I'm using standard library for both. It's like those two things, you could look back and sort of argue that it basically wiped out a whole set of third-party community tooling, because once it's in the standard library and it's written the way you wrote it, why are we not using the standard library, right?
Well, you describe it in a very violent way, and I hope I did put anyone out of business or cause anyone financial distress. But and you can still use Zap underneath Slog, and I'm sure many people still do that. And I also said in my talk and in the blog post, don't use. You're different because you're teaching a class. That's a different thing. You want it to be simple and elegant. But I told if you have systems that use this, don't rip it out, just wrap it. If you're writing new stuff, sure. Anyway, so I don't like the idea that I wiped anything out, but
it's interesting to me because, like, I'm just talking personally, right? Like, the moment anytime the Go team does something, my first thought is, they just gave me work to do. Now I got to go back and do this and do that and do that, right? And it's like a bother. And then like I do it, and then I'm like happy about it, like again, right? So,
well, imagine
really
if I had
interesting.
still been a Java trainer all this time. That would have been a lot of work. In fact, once they came out with enterprise Java beans, I'm like, no, I'm not going to teach that.
We're done.
Anyway,
talk to me. Let's. We've got like another 10 plus minutes. I want to talk about the MCP stuff. I'm actually interested in knowing if you can talk about this. Why did somebody feel it was important to have an official implementation of this and not, again, let it just be done by the community? Is it that important, or is it that it's really needed inside of Google?
well, first, you're talking about, okay, so there are two topics here, right? There's the model context protocol developed by Anthropic. And then there's the SDKs for that protocol in various languages. So you're not asking why is the model context protocol important? We're taking that for granted?
Yeah, I said, let's just take that for granted for a minute.
You're asking, why did the Go team decide to write their own? That's an excellent question. And the answer is the community did address it 3 different ways. And how can I say this politely? We were not happy we looked very, very carefully at all 3 of them. And we could have easily just blessed them, or blessed the most popular one and just walked away. And it was actually me, among other people. I mean, but I made a very strong case that, look, a few months of work, we can write something that we as a team would be proud of, and that'll make Go look good. Idiomatic Go, super clean, minimalist. And then so our plan is, and this is not a secret, it would be true. I tend to say little glib, dramatic things. I was going to say we're going to walk away. We're never going to walk away. What we're going to do is gradually transition ownership of that. So first of all, it doesn't live in a Google or Go place. It lives in github.com/model context protocol /go-SDK, which is an Anthropic org. And we work with Anthropic on this. They've blessed this, as they have all the other language SDKs, many of which they didn't write. And we are currently developing it, and we're close to version 1. And at that point, we will look to slowly transition. We'll find trusted lieutenants who understand the code and are good, and we'll continue to review code indefinitely, I think, major changes indefinitely. But we're not going to have this little ninja team we spinned up to work on it. We spun up. So we'll gradually move away from it. It was a short-term, intense effort to produce a really high-quality SDK for a critical piece of software. That, yes, Google wants it internally too, but we didn't do this because Google wants it internally. They could have imported some of those other things.
I find it interesting when the community, even the larger community, rallies around something so quickly, so heavily. Like this MCP just sort of came out of nowhere, and everybody. I think open telemetry is kind of the same thing. Everybody, like somebody said, let's build this, and suddenly out of nowhere, this mass just sorts of jumps on.
I think that had a longer gestation because there was something called Open Census that came out of Google, and that was a slower burn. I think this MCP stuff was just effectively overnight. I mean, it took us by surprise too when we saw it take off, and that's why Anyway, go ahead.
Do you think that happened because it was sort of needed and everybody just got lazy and said, let's just do this? Or
No, there's no laziness about it. It was clearly fulfilling a critical need, which was some sort of broker between all these things that wanted to be served. So now you don't have to write your the front end, the tool end to your whatever you do. You don't have to write that, one for Claude, one for OpenAI, and one for Google, and whatever else comes down the pike. Because they all have the idea of these tools, which are these things that the LLMs can use to get work done, but they all had different APIs for it. So someone had the very simple idea of saying, let's just have one way to do that.
wait, so let's talk about that again, because I think I'm a tiny bit confused, right? Like OpenAI created what we now call a standard API for talking to LLMs and models, right? Like we all adapted that for better or worse. Some HP based
Google's
thing.
APIs are not that, but we've probably taken things from it, but they're different. But anyway, go ahead.
But this MCP stuff, isn't that for more back end communication than front end communication?
Well, I think I see it as it's the back end of your LLM, in a way, but
This is allowing the LLM
I'm
to.
not sure what back end and front end are here now.
So this is for the LLM. Yeah.
This is so the LLM, it's not about the LLM. This is so I can take the Go command line and wrap it in something once, and then every person who writes an app that uses an LLM can use that thing in a uniform way. By use it, I mean tell the LLM, here's this tool you can use. And the LLM says, I'd like to use that tool. And then it's like you send an RPC to our little wrapper around the Go command, let's say, which we don't have right now, as far as I know. And then, it'll do it. So we just have to write this one wrapper once. So it's a great way to have a marketplace of these tools, the MCP servers, they're called, that lets the LLMs do, a million different things.
Yeah. Allows people to basically extend the tooling functionality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's the one thing I haven't done yet that's on my list for this year is the tool calling stuff. And I do work for Prediction Guard, and we're already looking at like these micro VMs to execute the tool calling and a sandbox and things like that. But we haven't talked about MCP or anything.
That's important too, I think, like it's probably important to run these things in a sandbox if you're running them on the same machine. And I don't think MCP directly addresses that.
No.
Doesn't. So there's like an auth layer, but there's not really that kind of sandbox thing.
But that's interesting. So I didn't even realize that. So you guys, you're building this in a community repo with the idea that that others eventually will have to take it over, but you'll always be there to make sure that things are being done in a, I don't want to use the word the right way, but at least the
Idiomatic.
standards, idiomatic way. What I'm also curious about with the last few minutes we have is, and I've like the last couple talks you've done where you talked about API design and stuff. Did those design philosophies that you've developed and that you're leveraging, which have been great, like where have they come from? Did they come from your Lehman Brothers days? Or have they come from after you got to Google? Because you have some really interesting and strong design philosophies around, because you have to maintain backwards compatibility at a level that I don't have to. Like sometimes I just want to break the damn thing because it just makes my life easier, and I can do that. You can't do that. So I'm just kind of curious where that knowledge and experience sort of came from.
It came from the culture of the Go team. I didn't think about any of that before joining the Go team. But, it's always been a really strong feature of Go from the beginning. When Go 1 was announced, they're like, it's going to be, we're not going to break it. There was the Go 1 compatibility promise right from when Go 1 was announced. And then Russ Cox continued that, made that even stronger with the idea that we can now make seemingly breaking changes, but because of the Go version in the go.mod file, you don't have to break. So there'll never, he has a great talk at a recent GopherCon that there'll never be a Go 2 because we can always maintain backwards compatibility. So, that's where my work on API diff came out of, this idea like, because it can be very, very subtle. Like my favorite example is you can add an unexported field to a struct in Go and break backwards compatibility, an unexported field that no one can see. So it turns out to be quite subtle. So it was a fun puzzle to figure out when that happens with API diff. And again, like it's just the culture. And designing APIs, it's also really important. So I think that particular talk that I just gave in Berlin in June, which is, I don't think it's available yet on YouTube, should be soon, was really inspired by this work on MCP because we were implementing a spec, and the spec, we didn't know how the spec would change, but it started to become clear that if we wanted all these convenience functions to make life simpler, we wouldn't be able to maintain backwards compatibility if the spec could make a non-breaking change from the spec's point of view, we would have to make a breaking change. So we rethought the whole design and made sure that even though it's a clumsier design, it's backwards compatible with the spec. So yeah, it's something that we've always thought about. One of the things I talk about are experiments, which hasn't been thought about very much. So that's kind of a new thing. And this also came out of the work I've been doing. One piece of work I didn't talk about that's not in my normal line is some static analysis work with the great Alan Donovan, co-author of the Addison Wesley Go book, and a static analysis expert. So I was working on these modernizers, which bring Go up to speed. And part of that is this ability to sort of inline old stuff into new stuff. So that was work I actually did. Because a few months before the conference, I'm like, I don't really have anything to talk about. And it's like, oh, I did this tiny little thing. And then there's all this other stuff about backwards compatibility. That's a talk. So that's how I ended up going to Berlin.
I find it interesting that your initial philosophy on this MCP stuff wasn't, we're just going to keep it at version 0 until we feel the spec is more mature.
Wasn't the spec. No, it wasn't. It's not because, it's because our API needed to be more mature. And in fact, we're at 0.2, and that the jump there was pretty dramatic. We realized we'd made a bunch of mistakes, and people pointed out things we were doing wrong, and we fixed them. And there's going to be another bump to 0.3, which is going to fix some more things, and then I think we'll be pretty much done. But my philosophy is always you have to let things bake. You have to let them bake in the community because you're not smart enough to know what's going on. Forget about I don't care about JSON schema, which is one thing I had to deal with for this, it's still in a draft state, and it's been like, I don't know, 8 years or something, and they could really probably never make any more breaking changes because so many people are using it. I don't know what they're going to do if they'll ever get to 1.0, but I don't care that the spec is in draft. I just want to make sure my API is correct and ideal and easy to use and backwards compatible.
Nice. Nice. All right. We are totally out of time. I could talk to you for another half an hour.
It's been so much fun. Yeah. A delightful exercise in narcissism for me.
But it's interesting story because you started kind of wanting to be an academic and work on that side, but your I think I don't want to say desire, need of doing practical things and helping people there sort of just forced its way out, right? And thank God it did, because
Yeah, one thing I didn't talk about is how much I love the idea of contributing to a team or to a community. And the thing that always runs through my head is this little clip from Futurama where Zoidberg says, what does he say? Hooray, I'm useful. I'm having a wonderful time. And that's always going through my head.
for this year, I don't know how long it's going to take to get this podcast out, but you're going to be at GopherCon US. That's in New York,
Yeah,
right?
not talking, but I'll be there.
You'll be at UK? Any chance?
No.
See you in UK? No?
No,
Florence? You're going to be at Florence?
couldn't get to Florence, but you convinced me maybe I'll try to get to Brazil or Singapore or something.
No, I got to get you to Brazil next year, man. I'm gonna be a pain in the ass until you get to Brazil.
No, I'm already sold. I'm already sold. I just have to sell the people with the purse strings on it. So
Sweet, sweet. All right, Jonathan, thank you for your time here. If anybody had any questions or wanted to reach out, I don't know, what's the best way for somebody to sort of ping you if they had questions?
jba@google.com.
Nice. You don't have a golang.org email, huh?
No,
Oh, that's
no,
they don't do that anymore.
No, they do, but it messes with our code review. It's why?
Oh,
Who cares?
okay. That's cool. That's cool. Cool. All right, Jonathan, thank you again.
Pleasure.
I appreciate your time. This is Bill Kennedy and Jonathan Amsterdam signing off, and we hope to see everybody again real soon.